All right, how's everybody doing? I know this is the last presentation before lunch, so I don't know about you. I'm getting a little hangry, but it's only 30 minutes. We'll get through it. So my name is Rebecca Burgum. I'm the VP of Growth at a company called Kensington Tours. It's not a brand that's very well known in the Canadian space. We primarily market to Americans, but we sell luxury, high-end, bespoke travel experiences. But I wanted to share with you kind of a problem that I think most of you will be facing in your organizations, and one I've definitely faced at all the organizations I've worked for in the last 20 years or so. And today's really going to be about not necessarily needing more tools and technology. It's actually leveraging what you already have at your organization and actually getting them working together. I don't know how many of you have been in conversations where it's like, we need this tool and we need this, and it's like we're not even leveraging what we have yet. So the story I have to share with you guys is my real world lessons about how we've changed the mindset from buying more to making what we already have work a lot stronger for us. And it's really, the theme is one ecosystem, various tools, but then tying this back to business outcomes. So if you take a minute to think about your own setup and your own organization, like, do your tools actually work together, or are people still doing things manually? I've worked at all sizes of organizations, small organizations where there's like 50 or less people, mid-size, huge behemoths where there's tens of thousands of people. This problem seems to be persistent, at least in my experience, right? At least to some extent. So, does your marketing team have data in 5 different places that doesn't line up with each other? Are sales still manually inputting every single piece of information on your leads and in your CRM? There's absolutely no automation or tools to support that. Can customer service actually see all the interactions that they've had, that the organization has had with their clients? And do finance teams actually understand and spend time like reconciling the platforms? So while you're managing these systems, and when we're faced with this manual effort and things are disparate and sitting in different places, there are competitors out there that are probably doing this smarter and more quickly than you are. But the solution to this isn't more tools. It's really connecting the ones that you have and connecting them to real problems and KPIs. So let me take you back to my journey. So I stepped into a role where I was responsible both for net new acquisition, but also for upsell and cross-sell of our existing clients in our database. On paper, we had really strong tools, right? We had a CRM, we had marketing automation, we had web analytics, we had a CDP that we were working towards. But in practice, it kind of looked like this. Right? Everything was fragmented. We were on multiple platforms. Reporting was reactive a lot of the time. It wasn't real time or even near real time. And the truth is, we need it to work like that. Right? How do you get your organization? Because I bet you, if you go through your stack, you can probably tick all, if not most of these off. How do you go from this disorganized infrastructure to one that's connected and truly working together before we add more stuff in? So we're not suffering from a lack of technology, we're suffering from a lack of integration. And today, we're drowning in tools. So enterprises use an average of 91 marketing tools in their stack, but we've got only 42% of marketers saying they can effectively use customer data. And you're probably wondering why I'm talking about marketing. We're going to get there in a second. But all of that to say, it's not a technology problem, it's a connection problem. Integration's not about adding more, it's about making what you have truly work together, and how do we shift our focus into that? The next thing, and this is where I feel like a lot of organizations can get it wrong. You've got to start with your stakeholders, not with your stack. And even the presentation that was in here before was saying, hey, we're shifting that mindset to talk to the people that are actually using or benefiting from the tools. So typically, when we're talking about bringing in a new tool into the organization, that conversation's coming through your IT department or your CIO or your CTO teams. And there's usually a lot of excitement about a new shiny tool, and that excitement can be pervasive throughout the organization. But then the adoption doesn't tend to follow. And I think the big problem for that, at least in my experience, is because the adoption follows the people and the leaders actually knowing and validating the importance of that tool, and that needs to go beyond just the IT or your technology teams. So who you engage first when you're talking about technology really matters. It's not always who owns the tools, it's the people who feel that friction and the friction that you're going to solve by doing what we were talking about on the previous slide. So my advice is always to start with a team that has something at stake. Where's the most friction in your organization? Where's the most noise? How can we use what we already have today to go to that person and say, hey, I've got a solution for you, get them bought in, and they're gonna be your biggest advocate and supporter to get that done. I think we all know nothing gets done in any organization when you go it alone, so getting that buy-in and that excitement from the get-go is really key. And I think from there, integration becomes an accelerator. This is no longer a side project. You have an equal counterpart to your CTO or your CIO in that organization, just as bought into the need and the direction of where we're going, and they're gonna champion that work. That means it's gonna continue to get prioritized over other things. If you need incremental investment, it's gonna be there. It also means the teams that need to benefit from that are going to adopt it and use it as well. So now on to the marketing part. So your stakeholder may not be who you think. CMOs are now the biggest internal consumers of data. They drive the spend, they drive the strategy, and they will drive the success of your integration. They are the top consumer of internal data. 71% say, from a study from Gartner, that it's their #1 priority going into 2026. Marketing also now drives over 50% of enterprise tech decisions. From CRM to AI enablement, it's your marketing teams that you want to get bought in that's really going to be a benefit for a lot of the tools that we work with every day. Marketing also now drives most of the budget too. So now they're the team that's pushing forward, that's pushing for connected customer views, for data activation, and for real-time intelligence, and they're often the ones to first feel the fragmentation. So, is your organization actually aligned? I think is the key question to ask, right? I've tried to draw a very bad leaky funnel, so bear with me on the graphic, but the point is companies are losing 20 to 30% of their revenue each year due to process inefficiencies. If you think you could even close a couple percentages of that gap, what does that mean for your organization? What does that mean for the revenue you're going to drive in that year? So there's a big opportunity. You don't have to close it all, but it's definitely there. Manual data handling causes 62% of marketers to miss campaign opportunities, right? Data is key. Data is key in all of our businesses, but for marketers especially, they're the ones with very large budgets that are trying to optimize to bring in that new revenue or get existing revenue out of your client set. The more that they're enabled, the better they can spend. So without a framework for these tools, the tools actually become overhead. They're not strategic. You don't have the buy-in. They're kind of, they're being run, and I think you have teams that really focus on them, but not necessarily to drive business outcomes. And then, they can often get forgotten about or not prioritized. So I think an action that you could take if this is a problem that you're facing is really running a connectivity audit. Think about your stack, think about what you have, what are actually talking to each other or connected to each other versus how much is disparate or working or being optimized in isolation. So for me, marketing, integration made our marketing efforts at the last 2 companies I've worked at really more intelligent. We got more sales production out of our teams. Our spend was more efficient. And here's some examples of what happens when it clicks, right? So there we go. Outcomes. So our qualified leads from doing all the things on the left, right? Web to CRM sync, building a scoring model. And this was a very simple scoring model that wasn't integrated. It sat outside of our existing infrastructure because we needed to prove it out. But we connected it into our media buying technologies. Progressive profiling, again, simple. This was not like the Cadillac of profiling, but just starting with something simple, and then also making sure from a lead assignment perspective, we had an algorithm that took all of this information and all of this data and actually decided who should that lead be assigned to, because we knew enough about our sales team to say, Bobby should get this lead because he's really great at that, and Sally should get this one. And the combination of doing this, and this wasn't overnight, this did take, we saw progress between 12 and 36 months, but the results at the end of year 3 was a 10% lift in qualified leads, 2 times the channel efficiency. So where we were before got a lot more efficient, both from a cost effectiveness, but also from a team efficiency. We were spending less times on calls, less times in sale conversation because they were better qualified. 40% increase in conversion, in net sales conversion, we saw a 40% uptick. 30% reduction in acquisition costs in the first 6 months, which then went up to 50% reduction in cost of acquisition by month 12. And this was just starting simple. There's still a lot of runway to go to get these things that we've done on the left. There's more to be done, but even just starting with a few core use cases that are friction within your organization can result in significant impact for your bottom line. So what happens when it all works together? Our working growth stack really drives margin, velocity, and scale. Connected customer journeys outperform siloed ones by 3 to 5 times when it comes to increased revenue impact. CRM and scoring and routing, that combination together drove 250% increase in cost efficiency. We went from a cost per lead that was just sub $500 down to a stabilized cost per lead of $125. So quite a significant decrease there. And then the data lake integration, we had a 10 times reduction in cycle lead time, meaning we were getting data faster, data was more accurate, data was more connected across the different touch points in the organization, led to better decision making, which is a key component of the success that we've seen there. So the action here is start integration with the KPI in mind, right? Think about that friction, think about the problem to solve, and what business metric will the outcomes of this connectivity or this integration actually solve? And that becomes your talk track, right? You repeat that over and over and over again to the people that you were repeating that to, start repeating that on their own, and say that in rooms that you're not in. That's also going to be key. Okay. But again, the tech won't work if the teams don't. It's more the mindset is shifting to the people first than the technology, right? Integration is a team sport. That's not the first time I've heard that said over the last day or so either. So I think, when you hear things echoed by multiple people, there's definitely something there. But we all know sales teams need faster conversion. Legal needs compliance and assurance that what you're doing is on side and isn't putting the business or the consumer at risk. Finance needs to see that ROI, right? They need to understand the investment, not just the financial investment into the tool, but a lot of organizations, when you get teams to work on certain projects, there's a brown dollar or cost to that, right? So what's the ROI, not just on the technology, but on the collective time spent? And how do you make it really easy for finance to understand that impact and also repeat that? And IT needs data integrity. So part of what we did was build data SLAs. So what were the governance tiers? What were the reporting frameworks? What were the SLAs? How did they all work together? We traveled as a group, not necessarily on everything, but the communication and really tackling the mindset of this cross-functional team to say, we are doing this. Hey, Bob in sales, let me just remind you, this is going to get you more sales, more faster conversion. Traveling with the same narrative over the course of these projects, so they don't happen overnight, was really key. Because if you see the stat on the right, only 38% of data projects actually meet the expectations once they're implemented into the org. And a lot of that is due to a lack of cross-functional alignment. So in any organization, if your C-suite isn't aligned, no matter what that C-suite looks like, things are never going to go as far as they can, which is why even though you might have a singular stakeholder that's going to have the most benefit of what you're trying to do here, how can you find the goodness for everybody else that's involved that's going to have to say yes or be bought in along the way? So here's what I learned from going first, because I was a first mover in my organization. We were very much in the mindset, as I mentioned at the top of this presentation, where we had a lot of tools. There was lots of chatter of like, we need new tools. Let's get more tools, like shiny. There's something more exciting. Like we need that too. But what I learned from kind of going first was actually being brave enough to have that conversation and have others have that conversation. To be like, we actually need to slow down. We don't need to go big. We need to go smart. Let's start by running a pilot. Let's tie it to a real metric. And let's prove it out and prove it out fast. And through that cycle of like, let me take a little bit and let me take a little bit of money and a little bit of time and a little bit of your teams. And let me prove to you that what I'm saying can be done. Proving that out. Then we got into a really healthy, virtuous cycle of proving, like stating and then proving, and then additional investment and additional buy-in, and the traction just became more and more unlocked, and that's where the scale happened. So our first pilot that we did was actually a scoring and a routing pilot, and 3 months later, through being able to tell the connected and ongoing story of that and the outcome and the benefit for the organization, we got approval to scale. So it's really how can you prove out things, take things in bite size, prove it out, get the buy-in, and then use that to ask for more money, more resources, more priority. Okay. So here's the playbook. If you take nothing else from today, I would say take these 3 actions. First, audit your stack. See where things are working in isolation, right? That should be really evident. Second, how do you anchor it to one KPI, right? I think the other thing when we're talking about KPIs, often there can be a lot, right? We can go from having no KPIs to having 20 KPIs, and then there's really no KPIs if we're measuring 20 different things. So just start with one. Choose one. What's the most important one? What's one that you can actually prove? Because that's the other part. Start there and anchor this work back to that one KPI. And then, as I've kind of stated a couple of times, go and build your cross-functional team, right? Figure out who needs to be in the room, who needs to be bought in, who needs to champion us and echo us through the organization. Who's going to be the people that you know are going to say no? Because we all know who those people are in our orgs, right? Like they come from a place of no, know those people, and figure out what's the right way to get their buy-in and to tell them what's in it for them, whatever that may be. It's really not about boiling the ocean. It's about building this bridge, both from a technology, what's the technology bridges between the different components, but also what's the bridge internally to make sure people are aware and understanding and it's connected. So integration doesn't start in the IT room. It really does start in the boardroom. So with that, I'd say a final thought is like integration is really like the unlock. Your data ecosystem likely doesn't flow without that. You don't need more dashboards. You don't need new tools to unlock untapped growth. I promise you there's an opportunity within your org where you can implement some of what I've talked about today. You need more connection between your tech, your teams, and your outcomes. So ask yourself, where is your system leaking value right now? And what can you do about it today? And then who do you need to bring along for the ride? So that is all I had. I can open up the floor. Oh, yeah, thank you. Short but sweet, right? But I'm happy to take any questions for the next 7 minutes or so. Yeah. Yeah.
You talked about integration and KPIs that were unlocked.
Yeah.
But that doesn't do anything itself. Like, what actions did the business do that they couldn't do before by having things more streamlined?
Yeah, for sure. So I'd say some of the problems we had, one of the key problems is that we had different versions of the truth from a data perspective. Like there was a lot to kind of reassemble, but I'd say data was probably one of the first things that we started with, where we had, from a marketing perspective, we had data in Adobe, we had data in GA, we had data in a CRM, and all of that was disparate. I think the first thing was recognizing that, hey, when we're looking for this metric, it's calculated 3 totally different ways, saying a complete different thing. I think it was first identifying that and then having an action plan to be like, do we have a source of truth? Why is there disparity? Aligning on that source, like lining on that source of truth, correcting the metric if we need to, and then almost like removing the other two as a source for that. So like that's one example of what we had to do was really like.
I was thinking more along the lines
Yeah.
of like, you said the conversion costs went down.
Yeah.
The conversion rates went up.
Yeah.
What did they do differently they couldn't do before as a result of the integration?
Yeah, so I'd say,
yeah.
okay, that's fine. I'd say like not having the right data. So first we were optimizing off of the wrong data. So that's key, right? You're thinking something is successful when in reality it's not successful. We had to fix that. The other thing was that we weren't actually tracking our users. So we obviously know with IP, like with cookies and IP addresses and switching devices, like that's getting more and more challenging to do. We actually started collecting more first-party data, right? And zero-party data wherever we can, but we had a first-party, intentional first-party data strategy to collect that from consumers and use that in our purchase power that we didn't have before. So like that was non-existent. We were just sort of using general targeting through the payment algorithms to do that. That's another example. We had no lead scoring. So I was in an organization where we were generating over 250,000 leads a year, and we were all treating them the same. So there was no way to do that. So we had to actually build a system to differentiate all of them.
So did the lead scoring then allow those leads to be channeled to sales in a more effective way?
So the lead score, so we had 2 things for that. So the lead scoring helped us better identify where to direct our media dollars. It also helped give them a score before we assigned it to a salesperson. And then in addition to that, we had a lead assignment algorithm that was built with that data as one of the inputs, but really then had 2 separate data sets. One that was a data set where we collected information on each single member of our sales team that we didn't have before, because the sales team was also treated largely as a homogenous group. And then data that we collected from the consumer, whether it was zero party, first party, or third party, put that built-in algorithm, and then that ultimately determined who did it get assigned to. And then we also started tracking after that. So like why that algorithm continued to be optimized and improved, we actually saw what was the time to connect, what was the value of that sale, and that feedback loop after it got assigned was really critical in terms of like improving that technology and then improving the close rates over time.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thanks. A question regarding piloting.
Yeah.
Often when piloting with other teams, the default is to go quite manual.
Yes.
So no automation, bit of back of the office magic. How do you balance piloting new initiatives with the need to have process efficiency and to show that the value of integrations when you are sometimes making things work behind the scenes manually?
That is such a great question, and I think I'm with you. I think you face that when you're doing a pilot. You're often forced into a space to be manual or more like auto manual than you would on your end state. When I face that I don't think that's a reality that you can necessarily get away from, right? Because the part of the reason you're doing the pilot is because they don't want to commit to like that deep integration. I think the lesson that I learned from doing a couple of those is being really clear about like what is different between the pilot and the integration. And because often you can get yourself into that trap, right? You do it manual or auto manual, like this is fantastic, like we don't need anything more. I think it's making that point and making that really clear from the get-go that this method that we're using to pilot is not sustainable, it is not scalable, there's a cost to that. Making sure you know exactly how you can validate that from a data perspective and not so you don't get into this this sea of like opinions, right? But I think declaring that up front. I had a really good example where we did this with a calendar booking tool. So we needed it, like we didn't have one. We did a business case. We understood like the impact that could have on various metrics, but like we didn't want to go deep integration. So we actually got a member, like we did it more auto manual. The pain point for the manual effort was actually on the sales team. And that worked really well for us for actually getting it moved into an automated solution, because the pain wasn't technologies or the pain wasn't marketing. The pain of the pilot was with the end user. So we had a really vocal group that was able to put that additional pressure on to be like, you have to do these, like you have to do the integration in these final components because we're not going to adopt it or use it. So that's probably more of a simpler example because you have a very vocal team usually with a sales group, but like that's how I've tackled it in the past, to who can create the noise to help force it into automation and integration, and then how do you make sure that's really clear from the get-go.
Thank you. That's really helpful to
No problem.
not have marketing compensate and do wizardry in the back end.
Right? Just like Excel everything all the time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, awesome. Thank you, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of your day and enjoy lunch.